how do I transition myself out of like being the MD for the consulting piece and kind of like put 100% of my effort into the product. And that's what I'm working right now, right? To kind of continue scaling the consulting piece right now. Plus the firepower to just hire like a kind of really good kick-ass MD for the business.
Hi, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Organization Business Podcast. I am your host, Lynn Peretti. My guest today is Daniel Lohrmann, a German-born entrepreneur and the founder and managing director of Ikaros, an international growth consultancy. Daniel focuses on helping businesses achieve sustainable expansion through product-led growth strategies and strong growth foundations. In this episode, Daniel shares the challenges of starting his second SaaS business on top of his existing consultancy business. You will have the opportunity to learn how Daniel is overcoming limited time and team resources to grow this second business, while also getting a first-hand insight into Daniel's exciting new business idea. Well, please join me in welcoming Daniel. Welcome to the show, Daniel. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Lynn.
Actually, the other day, I got to meet one of your friends who's from Germany as well. I think his name was Jacob. And he said, I actually introduced Daniel to EO Sydney.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. He's kind of like the one that got me on the whole EO train and convinced me that I should apply. So I was like, you're the second person that's telling me about EO. I think now is the time I'm going to go to this newbie lunch.
Yeah, he was lovely, by the way. So anyways, before we get started on the topic of how to actually juggle multiple businesses, would you kindly share with the audience a little bit about yourself and the two businesses that you're running?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. So I'm Daniel. I've lived in Australia since 2016. So I moved here with my wife, who's French. So we try to find a little bit of neutral territory between France and France and Germany. And we landed on Australia after some deliberation. And since 2016, I've basically worked in like different startups here in Australia, always in growth and data related roles. And then in 2019, I went and founded ikaros as a growth and data consultancy. And from the work that we've been doing there with our clients, there's been kind of a couple of micro products or ideas that have crystallized for us. And one of them is something that we are now pursuing as a separate entity and as a separate business in kind of like conjunction with the consulting work that we're doing. And that's effectively like an attribution and growth reporting platform for you to run your growth experiments in and automatically get insights and experimentation ideas.
Okay, so tell me, how did you come up with the second business idea? Is it because you created something for yourself and it's working, or you did it and you're like, hey, this is an opportunity here?
Yeah, so what we've found is that our clients always kept asking us the same questions. So they were always like, well, can you help us figure out how much are we spending for our customers? What's kind of our payback periods? What's kind of the ROI from the different channels, or even drilling down more granularly? How much the different touch points that we have with our customers contributing towards revenue, retention, or other kind of engagement metrics. So because there was so much repetition in these questions, we kind of started thinking, and we had solved these already, right? So we started thinking about how do we productize it and how do we make a subscription product out of it? Because ultimately, as a consulting company, of course, you can have like really high rates and increase your rates, or you can do like fixed price products where you have like a very standardized product process, etc. But ultimately, you are still selling hours of the team. So that always makes scalability quite challenging. And that's something that we have been working through as well. But you effectively always need to balance like the team size versus the hours that you're selling in the business that you're onboarding. So like for me, the vision was always, I want to have some sort of software product where I have infinite scalability, where I'm really just selling bits rather than people's times or widgets or something else.
Yeah. So tell me about the SaaS product that you created. Like, did you have any challenge building it? Like, I mean, I always hear from entrepreneurs having challenges getting it built, whether they do it locally or maybe overseas. And it's like, these development teams are killing me. Like, did you struggle with any of that with that business?
So I think nothing that I didn't expect. Yeah, so again, the benefit for us and for me, I think working in a consulting business that is working with a lot of other startups is, I think I've seen everything across kind of like all of our clients, good and bad. Yeah, so I think nothing surprises me anymore, really. Mm-hmm. So when we started building it, we are really following like a very iterative approach. So I don't know if you have read The Lean Startup, like fantastic book, by the way. but we're really following that build, measure, learn approach. So for us, we are at kind of iteration 3 almost of the product from like an architecture perspective right now. And we're really focusing on the back end right now. So because all the like fancy bells and whistles and stuff like that on the front end is nice, but right now we are really want to nail like the metrics and the data and the attribution and all of that stuff. And we want to make sure that that is as good as it can be. And then layer on top of that machine learning, AI being the and stuff like that, and effectively help you leverage that data, right? Because now you have really, really good reporting data that you don't get anywhere else. And we have kind of like ticked that box already. And now we're like thinking about, okay, how do you leverage that to drive insight for the businesses at scale effectively, right? So think about it in the following way. You have like so much data that you're always looking at with regards to like your sales or marketing channels and whatnot. But what if there was a tool or kind of like concierge almost that comes and said like, hey, Lynn, did you know that, let's say, Google Ads is outperforming Microsoft Ads by 30% on average? Specifically, these campaigns are very, very good on Google Ads, but not so good on Microsoft Ads or even other channels, right? So that's kind of like the type of insight that we want to surface at scale, and not only for digital channels, but also for offline channels, right? Let's say you're running a radio spot or you're running an advertising like out of home or in a paper or something like that. Again, that's something that we want to capture as well and do some probability-based modeling to understand how much that contributed towards kind of traffic, for example, contributed towards leads, contributed towards deals, and so on, right? So that's fundamentally what we want to solve as a problem. And then actually going in and adding another layer of that and really say, well, now you've got all of these insights, but what if the tool goes one step further and suggests improvements to you and say, like, for example, saying, hey, did you know that your sales team makes, like, calls from your sales team make it 3 times as likely that your leads convert, for example. But of course, there's like a cost associated with that. So you are currently at capacity with your sales team. But if we now take that piece of information from before where your Google Ads campaigns are outperforming other campaigns, the tool can now suggest to you and say like, hey, if you prioritize leads coming from Google Ads over your other leads with regards to kind of like sales calls, you're going to generate incremental revenue of X dollars, with this process change, and that's where we want to take it as a platform, so that you get clear, actionable recommendations which have a clear business impact associated with it.
Yeah, well, that sounds so exciting. And so you're saying that you're kind of is still in the back end developing. Is it mean it's not launched yet? You're still in the development stage?
Well, we're always developing, right? So it's changing every week, but we've got 3 pilot customers on the product at the moment, and we are just talking to one other large, well-known Australian brand about coming on board as a pilot customer for us. And that's super important for us, right? Because we don't want to develop something in like a black box and then go to market and be like, ta-da, here's our product. And then see maybe people don't like it or the nail, and we don't understand kind of like the brief or what the customer actually needs and whatnot. And then we've kind of wasted all that time. What we are really doing is we're kind of like, hey, here's like this unfinished product. It's not working properly, it crashes, it breaks, and so on. But clearly our customers are already getting value out of it because they love using it, even though kind of like super flimsy and like breaks all the time. But like the feedback that we have gotten is brilliant, both with regards to kind of like validation. There is a very, very, very clear demand and there's a very clear willingness to pay. But there's also like really valuable feedback with regards to the features and kind of like capabilities that they want. And what I really love is they're really engaged in the development. So they're like, also, it would be amazing if in the future you could also do this, like sensitivity analysis of your marketing budget, for example, where it kind of like goes in and says like, hey, you need to reduce your budget by 10%, 20% or whatever. Very topical at the moment, of course, right? And it's like, can you give me recommendations of where to make these cuts to kind of have the least possible impact? Now, like, of course, we'll be able to do that, right? Using the data that we have already collected. Now it's really about prioritizing which of these features and benefits do we work on next, what's kind of like important for one customer versus kind of like different customers, etc. And we're trying to stay really niche-y on the product as well. So effectively, we're focusing on kind of 3 verticals at the moment. We're focusing on e-commerce, marketplace, and SaaS. So that's kind of the verticals that we are targeting right now in the industry.
Okay, back to the question of, your main business being consulting, and that's what mainly pays the bill.
Yeah.
While this is so, has so much potential and obviously is scalable. So how do you balance your time, and do you face any kind of exhaustion and feeling like, oh, I'm so stretched in both places?
With difficulty, all right. Yeah. So definitely, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is very difficult because, of course, one, it's two different businesses which have kind of like maybe competing priorities, because both the consulting business and the SaaS business needs development resources, and they're one at the moment. And then if there is a client request coming in, we tend to prioritize that over all our own internal work. And that's kind of creating, of course, like a big challenge for us, because we have these kind of goals and milestones that we want to hit for the product. But then you have kind of like the money maker, right? The consulting that's actually funding all of that development. And it's definitely kind of a struggle for us. And we are all about iteration. So I think we've improved quite a lot around these topics, but we are still like looking for ways to kind of get better at it and better at juggling that consulting versus SaaS. And then even within the consulting, my personal time, do I work on the business, doing like stuff like business development, finding new clients, strategy, people matters, and so on? Or do I work on specific client projects? Specifically like for legacy clients that we have that kind of like used to seeing my face, which is then really cutting into the time that I've got available for like product vision, strategy work, business development, etc.
Yeah. So how are you managing it? Like, what is I know you don't have the clear answer, but I guess at this point in time, do you have some sort of like maybe certain days that you split up on to do certain work, or any methodology that you're using to manage your time?
Yeah, I mean, days, it's kind of like two cores and measurement for me. So what I try to do is like more like hourly blocks effectively in my calendar. So what I do is I've got time blocks in my calendar that I've blocked out for specific tasks. So for example, on Monday mornings, I've got like 1 hour blocked out to start my week, organize my tasks, my action items, etc. from the product management tool that we're using. So internally, we're operating in sprints, weekly sprints. The team, which you may know from like a development environment, but we basically just apply it to everyone. And then after that, I've got like a BD session blocked in my time calendar, etc. And effectively, I've also got unspecified focus blocks, which are always 90 minutes in my calendar. So basically from approximately 8 a.m. until like about 12 a.m., I've got kind of like about three 90-minute focus blocks or so. Again, it depends on the day, because usually in the morning, I've got at 7:30 to 8 a.m., I've got my stand-up call with our partner that's based in Vancouver, because again, we are like a globally distributed team. So there is like a lot of time zone lab as well. So I try to do the stand-up call with him while I'm on the way to the office. Then I've got like 30 minutes where I prepare my day, similar to kind of how I would work on the week. And then I've got my kind of like focus blocks. And then in the afternoon, I basically don't have any time block. If I have focus time, that's great. Usually I don't. So I will have meetings during that time. So that's one of the methods that I use. And then, of course, like just project management and like time boxing, and basically saying like, okay, this client, I've got 10 hours this week. Product, I've got 5 hours. Internal strategy, I've got 5 hours. This other client, I've got 10 hours, and so on and so on. So we do that on a weekly basis as well. Basically, just not on a task level, but on kind of like a team level. We say like, okay, how many hours can we budget for this person on this kind of center effectively? So that's kind of like key method. I've kind of like introduced a couple of smaller ones as well. As, for example, that doesn't work that well, but I only try to look at my emails and Slack messages 3 times a day, morning, lunchtime, and evening, to avoid kind of like getting wrapped out of like focus mode, because I get so many messages and then I'm like reading it and I'm like, oh, I make like quickly reply and stuff like that. And then you're like out and you can kind of like not be productive that way, because it's just so fragmented. I try to just do my meetings back to back rather than having like breaks between the meetings. So that's kind of like something to do. And then I use 2 other frameworks, which you may have heard of, called Inbox Zero and Eisenhower Matrix. So Inbox Zero is basically, I just try to work down my Slack and email messages to 0 every day. And the way I do that is I basically follow the Eisenhower Matrix. I think it's like do, defer, delete, or delegate. So if it takes less than 5 minutes, I'll just do it now. As quick reply to the email, for example. If it's something that is important and not urgent, but it's important, that's something that I need to do, I'll either defer it, I plan and schedule a time in my calendar when I can do this. And if it's not important, I'll delegate it. Yeah. So if it's important and urgent, for example, I'll ask my team to do it, or otherwise I'll delegate it for them to do at a specific point in time. And then if it's not important and not urgent, I'll just delete it.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It looks like you're a very productive kind of guy, really on top of the whole time management thing. And I think it's important when you're trying to run multiple things. So back to the question around the different business, the new one. Is it a new brand, new name, like it's like a separate brand to the first one? And why did you decide to go down that path?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really thought about the brand yet. We've created an entity, which is called Impact. So again, there is a separate entity, but we don't know yet what the branding is going on that whole thing. The main reason to split the entities is, again, if we may want to take external funding at some point in time, after we've kind of like ticked all those boxes and validated market, willingness to pay, validated the technology, our ability to deliver on the problem, of course, the problem itself, etc. It's kind of like all those risk factors that like a VC or other investor would look at. I want to basically get kind of like out of the way, yeah. And we basically self-funding validation and kind of like ticking those boxes against those risk factors. But then in the future, if we want to take as a dilutive or non-dilutive capital into the business, I don't want that to be commingled with the consulting business, which is obviously profitable. Yeah. And this would not be profitable. Again, we're kind of like subsidizing it at the moment, the consulting side of things. And again, we've got like paying interest in the product. So that's really kind of like strong signs. But again, it's really then about scaling out the development team and scaling out kind of customer acquisition effectively.
Gotcha. So that means that the existing clients are mainly clients that you've got from the first business, and you're kind of behind the scene going, hey, would you like to try this out? And that's why they're more lenient and open-minded to trying out something that is not perfect. So that means you can't really even get brand new clients yet. That comes with a challenge, right? To kind of, it's not time for marketing. It's still product fit stage.
Exactly. So that's where we're at the moment. As I said, we don't even have a front end, right? There's no there is no kind of like content for it. And that allows us to be faster on iterating on the back end, right? And iterating on like what metrics actually matter to the different verticals, different verticals want to see. And we do actually now, as I said, we are currently in conversation, not signed yet, but currently conversation with one large Australian brand that comes in completely new into the product, and we demoed it to them and they love it. Yeah. So I'm really hopeful that they're going to sign on the dotted line for us soon, which would again be also another really strong validation factor for us, right?
Yeah.
On the wide track. So definitely agree. But it's super exciting for us to kind of see this.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. It sounds like a really exciting business and very scalable, but I can already tell that you've got a different approach to this. You're like, in order to grow this, I'm going to probably need VC funding, investment. Is that in the pipeline that you're thinking, or are you hoping that you could still do it or keep it on your own?
As I said, I think we can. So our plan is to release our own front end and stuff by the end of the year, approximately, and that we've kind of gotten a pretty good V1.0. I'd say maybe at the moment we're at 0.2 or something like that. That we've released that by the end of the year with like landing pages, and then we're going to start testing acquisition channels effectively for customers, because right now we're effectively treating as like enterprise sales, right? We're speaking to clients and show them the product, explaining to them. Again, that's needed because right now the interface is just like a quick site reporting dashboard, right? It's just raw data and stuff like that. There is no hand-holding, no explanations, it's anything. So they need to understand the product and use it and so on. So it needs hand-holding, but we want to get it to a self-service level, right? Where you can go to the website, you sign up, you kind of like go through a couple of onboarding steps to hook up your analytics infrastructure, and then you start using it and you immediately have access to all your historic data, which is one of the key issues with some of the other commercially available models in the like media mix modeling space, for example, which is like not necessarily competitor, but is kind of like relatively close to what we are doing without kind of like a lot of the kind of like secret sauce. But that's kind of like probably the closest area. And a lot of the pain points with those models are that there is no self-service. There is no kind of like, let's load your historic data and you immediately see seasonality and stuff like that. But it's like, well, okay, let's go to the onboarding process, pay for the onboarding process, wait a year, pay for the model for a year. And now you've got data and now you can start analyzing, right? So the kind of time to value for the customer is way too slow. And also often requires them to change processes internally, which again, we are designing the model not to require. So we basically just take any data that the customer throws at us. There is some requirements around how your tracking infrastructure needs to be set up, around like event-based tracking via Segment or Snowplow, for example. But beyond that, for example, if you've got spot timings in an Excel sheet, just send that to us and we'll ingest it and we'll make sure the model kind of takes it into account. And so you and your teams don't need to actually change the way that they operate, which is kind of a key setting.
Really interesting. So just thinking back at the, few years you've ran the first business and then starting a brand new second business, what did you wish you have earlier on about starting that second one?
Oh, that's a really good question. What would I have liked to know earlier on about starting the second business? I don't know, right? Because I think for me, they are both feeding off each other a little bit, right? I would have never come up with the idea for the second business had I not started the first one, right? So yeah, I could have said like, maybe I should have just launched it traditionally, kind of take VC money, like scale it faster, etc., rather than doing this whole consulting route. But now I feel I'm in like a position where we've got one really rock solid, really sustainable kind of traditional professional services model that again, customers love. And then on the other hand, we have like this really sexy kind of technology model that's, I can see already is going to be like a hyperscaler in my opinion. And I feel we're kind of like really nailing all the requirements for that at the moment. And like the product market fit that I've seen so far is just off the charts with our kind of like really crappy MVP. So yeah, I'm super excited about that and about that journey. I mean, the one thing that I'll probably, and that's something that I'm thinking about, is how am I going to manage this medium term, right? Because medium term, for me, that means I will have to give up day-to-day operation and running of the consulting business to someone else. I need to focus on the product business. So that's kind of like the next big question for me, probably. Like, how do I transition myself out of like being the MD for the consulting piece and kind of like put 100% of my effort into the product? And that's what I'm working right now, right? To kind of continue scaling the consulting piece right now. That's the firepower to just hire like a kind of really good kick-ass MD for the business.
Yeah, I love it. The reason why I asked that is that when I started other businesses after my first main one, I always think it's easier. It should be, super easy now. I know what to do, but startup phase is just always hard. You're back to like figuring things out, hustling, and it's not as easy as just because you've done it before. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm probably right. I mean, the good thing is perhaps also that with this other business, we don't really need to think about any of those traditional business components like selling something. Yeah. So like I don't sell it, right? Because right now we're really laser focused on the product. And I'm happy with having kind of like the handful of pilot customers that we have. And of course, if it pops up in a conversation and I'm talking about it and someone comes to me and says like, oh, that sounded really amazing, can I buy it? Then I'm like, sure, let's kind of like jump on a demo and let's kind of like walk through it and let's look at it. But I'm not actively trying to acquire customers at the moment. So that's kind of like one less thing you need to worry about. Like Ikaros is kind of, we have all the people working for Ikaros. So the kind of like component is kind of like taken care of there as well. They are like, so the only thing really that we're working on is other business products. So it's really like narrow focus at the moment. So I don't have to deal with any of the other complexities that normally arise from founding a business like sales, marketing, etc.
It definitely helps to have an established business already. And what happened to me was when I started the second one, I ended up just giving up and merging it back to the original one because the original one has that branding. And so, it just kind of brings back a little bit of a flashback of my own experience. But just curious to know, you were saying that you're up to the next level thinking about how you're going to do something. Like, what do you normally do when you're in that unknown stage where like, I need to figure out the next thing to do? What are some of your go-to resources or methods of upgrading your knowledge or doing something new to help you to get to the next place?
That's probably not the answer you want to hear, but I don't really have kind of a plan, right? I just try to be like open-minded, intellectually humble, right? And say, I don't know what the next step is. I don't really know that much, right? Just kind of like trying to get ideas and input from as many different people as possible. And I kind of just start and continue mulling it over in my head. And over time, I'll probably like flip-flop a little bit between, okay, what's kind of a good solution? Should I go down that path or this path or that other path? But then over time, like the more I kind of think about it and the more input I get, I will kind of like crystallize on a path forward. And then that's ultimately what I commit to, right? So that's my process.
Yes.
I don't know if you can call it much of a process, but
Yeah, I think I would be the same. It's about asking around. Someone might know a book. Someone might know someone else that's done something. So exactly like what you would do. So that's all I was curious about. And I guess it leads me to the last question that I always like to leave with the audience before we wrap up this show is, Daniel, like, what do you want the world to remember you for?
I mean, I think the world is a really big term, so I don't know, maybe my family and maybe my colleagues and stuff like that. So I like trying to step it a little bit easier. But what's really important for me is just to be a good leader, right? Be kind of empathetic in how I lead teams and to kind of convey the vision that I've got for the business and to make sure kind of everyone feels like that they're being listened to, that they're on board with the journey, that they're kind of bought in to the vision and the strategy of the business. And that's kind of like something that's really important to me. And I want to make sure everyone has kind of like the balance that I want for myself in their lives, right? So I know sometimes it's not easy, right? Sometimes you have crunch time and you need to really kind of double down and commit. But I think medium and long term, we should all strive for balance. So that's what I kind of try to enable my team and myself, of course, to do as well. So that's, I think, really the one thing that I want people to remember you by is to being a good leader.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I'm going to put all your details in the bottom of the video description about your business and how to connect with you. But thank you so much. I totally agree with you, even what you want the world to remember you for, because ultimately I love to be able to create that balance as well, being a single mom at an early age. And I know you've got a young son, so that's really important to have that balance. So yeah, thank you, Daniel, for your time today.
Thank you. Great to see you.